My name is Clara Monroe. I'm 32 years old, and for as long as I can remember, Christmas has been more than just a holiday to me. It was the anchor in my childhood, a time when no matter how chaotic life got, my family would come together around the same pine scented living room, the same old vinyl records spinning carols, the same laughter bouncing off walls that felt warmer in December than any other month. My parents used to tell me, "Love is in the details, Clara," and I believe them. The way Mom folded napkins into little poinsettia shapes. The way Dad stayed up until 3 in the morning building my dollhouse so it would be waiting by the tree. They taught me that love wasn't loud or fleeting. It was patient, careful, and deliberate. So when I fell in love with Daniel, I wanted to give him the same. Daniel and I had been together for 2 years. Not forever, but long enough for me to imagine what forever might look like. Long enough for me to picture us blending our families, creating traditions of our own. He was the first man I felt truly safe with, the kind of safe that makes you brave enough to plan a future. That's why last November, I began planning what I thought would be our first real Christmas together. Not just the kind where you show up with a bottle of wine and smile politely. No, I wanted something meaningful, where families mix, stories are shared, and the person you love can see themselves in your world. I started small. Daniel's mother had once mentioned a rare porcelain tea set her own mother used to collect. I spent 3 weeks scouring antique shops until I found the exact pattern. When the shop owner pulled it out from the glass case, I nearly cried with relief. It wasn't just porcelain, it was proof that I had listened, that I cared. For his father, I tracked down a leather-bound first edition copy of a book he had referenced in passing, something about early explorers. The kind of detail most people would forget, but not me. For Daniel's younger sister, a handmade necklace from a local artisan. Quirky, one of a kind, just like her. And for Daniel himself, I splurged. He was a writer, though he'd never admit it out loud, filling journals with half-finished poems and scraps of dialogue. I saved up for months and bought him a limited edition Italian journal set, the kind bound in soft leather with paper that begged for ink. Each gift wasn't just a present, it was a message. I see you, I remember you, you matter. I even coordinated schedules between our families, booked a cozy inn near his parents' place, reserved a restaurant for Christmas Eve dinner. Every ribbon tied, every note written. It was all love made visible. Maybe that sounds boring to some people, but to me, it was beautiful. One evening in early December, I sat on Daniel's couch, showing him the carefully wrapped box that held his mother's tea set. The box was tied with silver ribbon, crisp edges, perfect in its simplicity. "Remember how your mom mentioned her grandmother's tea set at Thanksgiving?" I asked, my eyes glowing with anticipation. "I found one. The same pattern. She's going to cry when she sees this." Daniel barely looked up from his phone. "Oh, yeah, that's nice." My smile faltered. "That's all?" "Clara, it's thoughtful, I know. I'm just stressed, that's all. The holidays, a lot of pressure." He didn't meet my eyes. I wanted to ask why he was glued to his phone lately, why his tone felt so distant, but I didn't. I told myself not to overthink it. He was tired. Work had been rough. The season was overwhelming. But the truth? Something in him had shifted. It was in the way his replies grew shorter, the way he turned his phone screen away when I walked into the room, the way a name, Melissa, slipped into conversations more often than I liked. "Melissa always said I was too good for small-town life," he mentioned once while flipping channels. "Melissa thinks I should take more risks," he added another night when I asked if we should confirm dinner reservations. "Melissa, Melissa, Melissa." I told myself not to be paranoid. People reconnected with old friends all the time. But deep inside, a quiet dread began to coil in my stomach. Still, I pushed it aside. I believed in Daniel. I believed in us. A week before Christmas, I stayed up late wrapping gifts at my apartment. Each package was precise, corners sharp, bows tied with care. I imagined the smiles on their faces, the way Daniel's hand might squeeze mine under the table as his family unwrapped their presents. That image kept me going. But even as I taped the final package, I couldn't ignore the silence in my phone. Daniel hadn't texted all evening. When I called, he answered on the third ring, his voice oddly flat. "Everything okay?" I asked gently. Yeah, just tired. Don't worry. Don't worry. 2 words that almost always mean, there's something to worry about. When I hung up, I stared at the pile of gifts arranged neatly on my floor. The porcelain tea set, the book, the necklace, the journals. My heart swelled with both pride and fear. Because deep down I knew something was coming, and no amount of planning could save me from it. That night, as snow fell quietly outside my window, I whispered to myself, please let this Christmas be the start of something, not the end. December 22nd, 3 days before Christmas. I was sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by wrapping paper, ribbons, and the quiet hum of holiday music from the radio. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon from the candle burning on the coffee table. My heart was lighter than it had been in weeks. Finally, the last gift was almost ready. I was humming under my breath, carefully tying the bow on Daniel's journal set, when I heard the front door open. Clara, Daniel's voice called softly. Hey, you're just in time. I smiled up at him, holding the finished gift in my lap like a small treasure. Look, last one done. But he didn't smile back. He stood in the doorway, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, his expression unreadable. Something in my chest tightened. Daniel, what's wrong? He exhaled slowly and walked closer, sitting across from me. The way his eyes darted, the way his fingers tapped nervously against his knee, I knew. The air shifted, heavy, suffocating. Clara, we need to talk. The ribbon slipped through my fingers. My heart stumbled. Talk about what? I asked, though part of me already knew. He took a breath. I'm bringing Melissa to Christmas dinner, instead of you. The world tilted. The music from the radio suddenly felt obscene, cheery bells clashing against the silence that had swallowed me whole. My mouth went dry. I'm sorry, what did you just say? He couldn't even look me in the eye. I didn't plan for it to happen this way. Melissa and we've been talking. And I realized, things with us, Clara, they feel so structured, like we're following a blueprint for what a relationship should be. With her, it's different. Lighter. More alive. Alive. The word hit me like a slap. I set the journal down carefully, my fingers trembling. So, 3 days before Christmas, after I've spent months planning gifts, reservations, schedules, you're telling me you'd rather spend it with someone else? His jaw tightened. I know the timing is awful, but I didn't want to keep pretending. You put so much thought into everything. The gifts, the reservations, every little detail. It should make me feel loved, but it makes me feel trapped. Trapped, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. By someone caring about you? By someone making sure you and your family feel special? His eyes finally met mine, wet and conflicted. Melissa doesn't expect anything. She just lets me breathe. She doesn't map out every second of our future. I stared at him, my pulse roaring in my ears. I could have screamed. I could have begged him to reconsider. But instead, I felt something colder than rage settling inside me. Quiet clarity. I stood slowly, walked over to the stack of gifts neatly arranged by family member, and began gathering them into a pile. What are you doing? He asked, his voice uneasy. Finishing what I started, I said simply, placing the tea set, the book, and the necklace into a neat stack. I set the journal, the gift meant for him, on top last. These are for your family. I put a lot of thought into them. They deserve to receive them, even if I won't be there. He reached toward me, hesitant. Clara, you don't have to. Yes, I do. My voice broke, but my hand stayed steady. Because your family shouldn't pay for your choices. I won't ruin their Christmas. He looked stricken, torn between guilt and stubbornness. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I let out a bitter laugh. No, Daniel. I'm making it exactly as hard as it needs to be. Because this is what betrayal feels like. I walked to the closet, pulled out the overnight bag he kept at my place, and set it by the door. You should take your things. Clara, wait, he said, rising quickly. His voice cracked with something that almost sounded like regret. Can't we at least talk about this, maybe as friends? Friends? My throat burned as the word left me. You've made your choice, Daniel. Melissa is your present. Maybe she's your future, but I am not your friend. Not after this. Tears spilled down his face, but I couldn't tell if they were for me or for the inconvenience of guilt. He shook his head, whispering, "This isn't how I wanted it to happen." I stood tall, even as my insides crumbled. But it's how it happened. 3 days before Christmas, after everything I poured into us. You didn't just reject me, you rejected the way I love, and that's something I'll never forgive. I opened the door, the winter air rushing in, sharp and merciless. He lingered in the doorway, his eyes pleading. I hope you know I did care about you. I swallowed hard, my voice steady despite the tremor in my body. No, Daniel, you cared about the convenience of me. There's a difference. And then I shut the door. The silence that followed was suffocating, almost unbearable. The house felt empty, stripped of warmth. The candle had burned low, its flame flickering like it, too, was about to give up. I sank onto the couch, staring at the pile of ribbons and wrapping paper scattered around me. My chest felt hollow, but strangely, no tears came. Not yet. Instead, I sat in the stillness, clutching the journal that would never be his, and whispered into the quiet. 3 days before Christmas, and now I have to find a way to survive the holiday without him. Christmas morning came like a cruel trick. The world outside my window glowed with fresh snow. Children's laughter echoed faintly down the street, and somewhere a neighbor was playing Bing Crosby on repeat. The whole town seemed wrapped in warmth and cheer, while I sat in my apartment, staring at the half-lit tree, its ornaments glinting like tiny fragments of a life I no longer recognized. This was supposed to be our first Christmas together, Daniel and me, the one I had dreamed about, planned for down to the smallest detail. Instead, it was just me, a cold mug of coffee, and the mocking silence of everything I'd prepared. I tried to distract myself, sipped the coffee, adjusted the lights on the tree, straightened the pile of untouched gifts I had decided to donate. But no matter what I did, the emptiness seeped through. My phone buzzed. Daniel. I stared at the screen, debating whether to read it. Finally, I opened the message. My mom loved the tea set, Clara. She cried, said it was the most thoughtful gift she'd ever received. I told her it was from you. A sharp ache spread through my chest. I had imagined being there, watching her unwrap it, watching her tears fall as Daniel's hand squeezed mine under the table. Instead, I was the ghost of Christmas morning, my love delivered in silence. Another buzz. Melissa is struggling to fit in. My sister doesn't like her. She keeps asking where you are. I don't know what to tell her. And then, minutes later, I think I made a mistake. I set the phone down as though it had burned me. My hands shook. Part of me wanted to reply, to scream, "Yes, Daniel, you did make a mistake. The worst one." But another part of me knew better. He wanted comfort. He wanted me to ease his guilt. But what about my pain? What about the hours I'd spent planning? The hope I'd poured into every carefully chosen gift? He didn't want me. He wanted relief from himself. I slipped the phone under a pillow and forced myself to get dressed. The streets were unusually quiet, the kind of hush that only happens on Christmas morning. I walked for hours, my breath visible in the icy air. Each house I passed glowed with scenes of togetherness. Families gathered around trees, children tearing into presents, parents snapping photos. And for the first time in my life, I felt like an outsider looking in. When I couldn't walk anymore, I sat on a bench near the park. Snow dusted the branches above me, drifting lazily in the still air. I closed my eyes and thought back to my childhood, the way my father used to make pancakes shaped like reindeer, the way my mother's laughter filled every corner of the house. They had given me a blueprint of love, love that was steady, reliable, rooted in thoughtfulness. And I had carried that blueprint into adulthood, into every gesture with Daniel. But he had called it suffocating. A lump rose in my throat. Had I been wrong all along? Was love supposed to be wild, spontaneous, reckless? I shook my head hard, snowflakes scattering from my hair. No, love wasn't the problem. Daniel was. I pulled out my phone and called my parents. "Clara," my mom's voice lit up the line. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. We miss you here." "Merry Christmas," I said, my voice wavering. My dad's voice chimed in next, warm and steady. "How are you holding up, kiddo?" There was no point pretending. "Not great," he sighed. "Someone who would leave you like that, 3 days before Christmas? That's not someone you want beside you anyway." My eyes burned. It hurts, Dad. I put so much into it, into him, and it didn't matter." "It matters to the right person," he said firmly. "Don't you ever doubt that. The way you love, it's rare. Don't let him make you feel like it's wrong." Tears spilled freely then, hot against the winter chill. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that. After I hung up, I walked home with lighter steps, though the ache in my chest still lingered. My phone buzzed again, another message from Daniel. "Please, Clara, can we talk after the holidays? I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I can't stop thinking about you. She's not you." I stared at the screen for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, words flooding my head. Anger, sorrow, longing. I typed, deleted, typed again, deleted again. Finally, I turned the phone off. Because the truth was simple, he had made his choice, and I would not help him feel better about it. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, curled up under the glow of the Christmas tree, and whispered to myself, "This is not the end. This is the beginning of something else, something I can't see yet, but something mine. For the first time since Daniel's confession, I felt a spark of resolve. If I ever let someone in again, they would have to love not just me, but the way I love. I wasn't going to change that for anyone. The holidays passed in a blur of silence. No Christmas dinner, no family introductions, no stolen kisses under mistletoe. Just me, learning how to sit in the emptiness Daniel left behind. But by New Year's Eve, the silence was broken. My phone rang while I was making tea, the sharp sound cutting through the quiet of my apartment. I almost didn't answer when I saw his name flash across the screen. Almost. I pressed the phone to my ear. Clara? Daniel's voice was raw, frantic. Please, don't hang up. God, I made a terrible mistake. I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. Go on. Melissa left, he blurted out. She admitted she was just having fun. It wasn't serious to her, and His words caught, heavy with panic. I threw away the best thing I ever had. You. Clara, I was so scared of how serious things were getting. I panicked. I thought I wanted freedom, but it feels like falling into an empty room. Please, can we talk? Can we fix this? For a moment, I let his desperation hang in the air. Once, his words would have shattered me, would have made me drop everything, rush to his side, forgive instantly. But now, all I felt was a tired sort of clarity. No, Daniel. My voice was calm, even. We can't fix this. He sucked in a breath, as though my words had knocked the air out of him. But what we had was real. Don't you feel it? I know you do. I gripped the edge of my counter until my knuckles whitened. What we had was real, but you chose something else. You didn't just leave me. You rejected the way I love. You called it suffocating. I didn't mean it like that. You did. I cut him off. And maybe that's the part that hurts the most. Because the way I love isn't something I can change, nor should I. Not for you, not for anyone. There was silence on the other end, then a broken whisper. Please, Clara, I'll do anything. I'll prove it this time. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes, though not for him. For myself, for the months I wasted, the pieces of me I gave so freely. No, Daniel, you made a choice. Mistakes are accidents. Choices are deliberate, and you chose to walk away from me. He begged again, his voice unraveling into sobs, but I ended the call. The days after were filled with more of the same. Calls, voicemails, messages pinging at all hours. I can't sleep without you. Melissa was nothing compared to you. Please, just let me explain. Every plea was soaked in guilt, not love. He didn't want me back. He wanted relief from the shame of what he'd done. And I refused to be his cure. Instead, I poured my energy into myself. I rejoined a painting class I'd abandoned years ago. I started jogging at the park every morning, my lungs burning, my body finally moving forward, literally and figuratively. I reached out to friends I hadn't seen in ages, spent hours laughing over wine and late-night takeout. Each day, I rebuilt a little more of the person I had been before Daniel. And each night, when his number lit up my phone, I let it ring. But he didn't stop. One evening in mid-January, I was sketching in my journal when the phone buzzed again. Against my better judgment, I answered. Clara, his voice cracked instantly. I'm begging you, just dinner, just one conversation. I took a deep breath. Daniel, listen to me. I need you to hear this. You don't get to break me and then crawl back because you're lonely. That's not love, that's desperation. But I love you, he shouted, his voice hoarse. No, I whispered. You love the comfort of me. The way I made life easier for you. But love isn't comfort, Daniel. It's consistency. And when it mattered most, you were anything but. He sobbed. For a moment, guilt tugged at me, because I remembered the man I once adored. But then I remembered the cold look in his eyes when he said Melissa made him feel alive. The way he dismissed my love as a cage. And the guilt burned away. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said softly. But I'm not it. Not anymore. I hung up before he could respond. By February, the calls slowed. By March, they stopped entirely. I heard through a mutual friend that Daniel was struggling, that he'd lost weight, withdrawn from everyone, that Melissa was long gone. And maybe once, that news would have broken me. But now, I simply hoped he figured himself out, because he was no longer my responsibility. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free to paint, free to laugh, free to breathe without someone accusing me of suffocating them. Most of all, free to believe that someday, someone would see the way I love not as a burden, but as a gift. One quiet Sunday morning, as I was cleaning, I stumbled across the Italian journal I had once bought for Daniel, still wrapped, still perfect. I held it for a long time. Once it had represented my devotion. Now it represented survival. Proof that I had poured my heart into someone and survived their rejection. I unwrapped it, ran my fingers over the soft leather, and opened to the first page. And then I wrote, "This is not the story of how he broke me. This is the story of how I found myself again." Spring arrived slowly, like the world itself was healing with me. The snow melted into glistening rivers along the sidewalks. Crocuses pushed through damp soil, and the air smelled less of loss and more of possibility. For months, I had been rebuilding piece by piece. Now, for the first time in a long time, I felt like Clara again. Not Clara who loved Daniel, not Clara who was left for Melissa, just me. It started small, morning jogs in the park, an art class every Thursday evening, charcoal smudges on my hands, making me feel alive in ways I hadn't in years. Coffee dates with friends I'd neglected during my relationship, rediscovering how much laughter I'd missed. I filled the silence Daniel left behind with music, with brushstrokes, with the steady rhythm of my own heart, learning how to beat freely. And somewhere in that rhythm, someone new appeared. His name was Ethan Carter. The first night I noticed him, he was bent over an easel in our shared art class, sketching a landscape in gentle, deliberate lines. He wasn't loud, wasn't trying to draw attention, but his presence carried an ease that filled the room. We spoke by accident, when my charcoal rolled off the desk and he caught it midair with a smile. "You saved me," I laughed nervously. He handed it back. "Can't let art die before it's born." It was a silly line, but something about the way he said it, sincere, a little shy, made my chest warm. Over the weeks, conversation flowed naturally. He'd ask about my sketches. I'd tease him about his obsession with shading. He told me he worked in architecture, that he loved creating spaces where people could breathe and belong. One evening after class, we found ourselves walking the same way home. The air was crisp, the streetlights casting gold across the pavement. "You're different from most people I know," Ethan said suddenly, glancing at me. I raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "The way you notice things," he replied. "Like when Sarah forgot her sketchbook and you lent her yours without hesitation. Or the way you remembered my favorite coffee order after I mentioned it once." I shrugged, embarrassed. "It's just how I am, I guess. Details matter to me." His smile deepened. "That's what I like about you." My breath caught, because it was the exact thing Daniel had once thrown back at me, calling it suffocating. Yet here was Ethan, saying it as though it was a treasure. As weeks passed, friendship turned into something softer, something steadier. He invited me to help design the layout for his new apartment, and when I carefully measured spaces for furniture and color palettes, he grinned. "I love how you plan things out. Makes me feel like you actually see me in your vision." I blinked at him, startled. "You don't think it's too much?" "Too much?" He shook his head. "No, it makes me feel like I matter." His words struck me like sunlight breaking through clouds. Maybe I wasn't too much. Maybe I was just enough for the right person. We started spending weekends together. Quiet hikes, gallery visits, long dinners, where conversation flowed so easily, I sometimes forgot the hours passing. With Ethan, I didn't feel the need to perform or prove myself. I didn't fear being too structured or too detailed. He welcomed it. He leaned into it. One night, as we shared a bottle of wine in his half-furnished living room, I found myself confessing things I hadn't said aloud in months. "I used to think love meant proving yourself," I admitted softly. "That if you paid attention enough, gave enough, maybe someone would never leave. But Daniel..." I stopped, swallowing. He made me feel like the way I loved was a flaw. Ethan set his glass down and looked at me with steady eyes. "Then he didn't deserve it. The way you love, that's not a flaw, Clara. It's a gift. And one day, someone's going to treasure every bit of it." My throat tightened. "Maybe that someone is you." His lips curved into a small, sure smile. "Maybe it is." By early summer, it was undeniable. I was falling for him. Not with the dizzy, frantic rush I'd once mistaken for passion, but with something stronger, quieter. The kind of love that feels like home. And for the first time, I didn't just hope for a future. I could actually see it. One afternoon, while walking past a jewelry store, I stopped in front of the window. A simple gold band caught my eye, elegant and timeless. I didn't go inside. I wasn't ready. But for the first time since Daniel, the thought of marriage didn't feel like a broken dream. It felt like a possibility again. That night, I wrote in the journal I had once meant for Daniel, now filled with my sketches and reflections. "The right person won't be afraid of the way I love. They'll hold it, cherish it, and give it back in their own way. By the time autumn leaves began to fall, I realized something profound. I no longer thought about Daniel. Not when I tied ribbons around gifts for my niece's birthday. Not when I mapped out a weekend getaway with Ethan. Not when I caught myself laughing so hard my stomach hurt at something silly Ethan said. Daniel was a shadow in my past, and Ethan was the light pulling me forward. One evening, as we walked through the park under strings of glowing lanterns, Ethan slipped his hand into mine. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I used to think love had to be wild, spontaneous, like in the movies. But with you, it feels different, better, like every moment actually means something." I squeezed his hand, my heart swelling. That's what I've always wanted, to build something that lasts, piece by piece. "Then let's build it together," he whispered. And in that moment, I knew. The story wasn't about Daniel anymore. It was about me, and about the kind of love I had always believed in, finally finding a place where it was not only safe, but celebrated. By December, the city had transformed. Twinkling lights wrapped around every lamppost, shop windows dressed in gold and red, the air crisp with the promise of holidays. It was my first Christmas with Ethan, and the difference was staggering. Where last year had been marked by betrayal and silence, this year was alive with warmth. We decorated his apartment together. He insisted on hanging ornaments lopsided, while I fussed with spacing, laughing until I gave up and let them stay crooked. "I like them this way," he grinned. "It feels like us, imperfect but real." And it did. For the first time in years, I felt excited for the holidays again. The night of Mike's holiday party, Ethan and I walked in hand, arms full of homemade desserts and bottles of wine. Laughter spilled from every corner of the house, and the scent of cinnamon and mulled wine clung to the air. I felt steady, confident, loved, until I saw him. Daniel. He was standing by the punch bowl, shoulders hunched, scanning the room with restless eyes. He looked thinner, smaller somehow. His clothes hung on him awkwardly, and his smile, when it came, was strained, brittle. My stomach dropped. For a heartbeat, the world blurred, last Christmas flashing like a cruel echo. Ethan noticed instantly. "Clara?" His hand tightened gently around mine. I steadied my breath. "That's him." His eyes followed mine. "Daniel?" I nodded. "Do you want to leave?" Ethan asked quietly, already ready to turn us around. I shook my head. "No, not this time. He doesn't get to take this from me." We mingled, greeted friends, set down our desserts, but inevitably, Daniel noticed me. His eyes widened, and for a moment, he froze like a man staring at a ghost. Then he crossed the room. "Clara," he said, his voice rough, almost breaking. I didn't know you'd be here." I straightened my shoulders. "Hello, Daniel." His gaze flicked to Ethan, standing close at my side. Daniel's throat worked. "This is Ethan Carter," Ethan said smoothly, extending a hand. "Nice to meet you." Daniel hesitated, then shook it, though his grip was weak. His eyes returned to me, pleading. "You look good." "Thank you." My tone was polite, cool. The silence between us buzzed, tense and heavy. Then Daniel spoke again, words tumbling too quickly. "I've been thinking about us, about what we had. Clara, don't you ever miss it?" I stared at him. Behind me, I could feel Ethan's steady presence, grounding me. "No," I said evenly. "What we had is the past, and I've moved on." His face crumpled. "But it was real. We were real. The way you planned everything for us. Don't you miss that kind of connection?" I almost laughed, but it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. "The same planning you once called suffocating?" His mouth opened, closed, no answer. Ethan squeezed my hand gently, then spoke with warmth that was also edged in steel. "Clara's attention to detail, the way she cares. That's one of the things I love most about her. It makes me feel seen, like every moment matters." Daniel's eyes darkened, his jaw tight. "And," Ethan added, smiling at me, "we've been planning Christmas with my family for weeks now. Clara's even working with my mom to perfect her grandmother's prime rib recipe. It's become our little tradition." Daniel looked gutted. His eyes darted between us, realization dawning. Everything he had rejected about me was exactly what Ethan cherished. "Please, Clara," Daniel whispered desperately, his composure unraveling. "I know I ruined things, but can't we try again? Just start over?" I took a breath, calm, steady. "No, Daniel. I'm not the same woman you left, and I'm grateful for that. You taught me what I deserve by showing me what I should never accept." His voice cracked. "I was young, stupid, scared, and now you're older," I said softly. but I hope also wiser. I truly do. But your lessons don't belong to me anymore. They belong to you. Silence. Around us, the party hummed on. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses. But in our little corner, it was just the three of us, the past, the present, and the future. Ethan touched my elbow gently. We should get back to the party. I nodded, looking at Daniel one last time. Take care of yourself, Daniel. Then I turned, walking away with Ethan. The rest of the night felt lighter, easier. At one point, Ethan leaned close and whispered, "That looked hard." "For me or for him?" I asked. He smiled softly. "For him." He looked like he was watching his life walk away. I exhaled slowly. Maybe he was, but that's not my burden anymore. Ethan kissed the side of my temple. No, it's not. We spent the rest of the evening laughing with friends, making plans for New Year's, slipping into the warmth of a future that was ours alone. And for the first time since last Christmas, I didn't think about Daniel at all. 1 year later, the world looked different. Not because the city had changed, but because I had. Last Christmas, I sat alone in silence, clutching a gift meant for someone who no longer wanted me. This Christmas, I was surrounded by warmth, laughter, and love that didn't make me feel like too much. Love that made me feel like enough. Ethan and I had moved into a new apartment that fall, a bright place with tall windows and creaky floors that we filled with paintbrushes, books, and half-finished projects. By December, it had transformed into a Christmas wonderland. String lights draped across every wall, a tree glittered in the corner, ornaments we'd picked out together dangling from its branches. The scent of cinnamon rolls filled the air as I arranged stockings, one for me, one for Ethan, and one for the silly stray cat we'd adopted, who now dozed under the tree. This year, we weren't just celebrating Christmas, we were hosting it. Both our families gathered in our apartment that evening, his parents bringing wine, my parents bringing their endless good humor, my niece darting around in a reindeer sweater. It was chaos and joy all at once, and I felt a swell of pride watching everyone squeeze around the table we had decorated together. "This is wonderful, Clara," Ethan's mom said warmly, taking in the spread of food. "You've thought of everything." "She always does," Ethan replied with a smile, reaching for my hand under the table. His touch was grounding, steady, and full of quiet affection, and for the first time in years, I felt exactly where I was meant to be. Later that night, after dinner and games, when the dishes were washed and the last of the guests had left, Ethan pulled me onto the couch. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting golden shadows. "I have something for you," he said softly, pulling a small box from his pocket. My breath caught. He opened it to reveal a simple, elegant ring, gold, with a single diamond that gleamed in the light. "Clara Monroe," he began, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "From the moment I met you, I knew there was something extraordinary about the way you see people. You don't just notice details, you honor them. You make people feel seen, cared for, cherished. And I want to spend the rest of my life being on the receiving end of that kind of love, and giving it back to you in every way I can. Will you marry me?" Tears filled my eyes. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I could only feel the weight of everything. The heartbreak of last Christmas, the silence, the rebuilding, the hope, and now this. A man who didn't just accept the way I loved, but celebrated it. "Yes," I whispered, then louder, surer. "Yes, Ethan, of course I will." He slipped the ring onto my finger, and I laughed through tears as he pulled me into his arms. This wasn't a love built on running from structure or chasing chaos. This was a love built on choosing each other, day after day, the kind of love that lasts. A few days later, while running errands downtown, I passed an antique shop. Something in the window made me stop. A porcelain tea set, the exact pattern I had once hunted for Daniel's mother, the gift that had been unwrapped in my absence. For a heartbeat, memories rushed back. The hours spent searching, the way I had imagined her face lighting up, the crushing ache of knowing I wasn't there to see it. But instead of pain, I felt something else. Peace. I smiled faintly, then turned away, continuing down the street. Because the tea set wasn't my story anymore. Daniel wasn't my story anymore. My story was Ethan. My story was us. Our families blending, our traditions growing, our future unfolding with every careful step. That night, as I wrapped the last of the Christmas gifts, Ethan came up behind me, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You're planning again," he teased, watching me tie perfect bows. "Always," I said, smiling. He kissed my cheek. "Good. I love watching you build these moments. You don't just plan events, Clara, you build memories. I paused, my throat tightening. That's exactly what I want to do. For you, for us, for our family someday. And that's exactly why I fell in love with you, he whispered. As I placed the final gift under the tree, I thought back to the girl I had been 1 year ago. The girl who believed her love was too much, too heavy, too suffocating. She was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her worth. A woman who understood that the right person would never see love as a burden. A woman who had found that person. And as the fire flickered and the snow fell softly outside, I realized something. Last Christmas had broken me, but this Christmas had remade me.